All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We're here. My name is Chris Gill. I am actually, we could probably flip the slide, but Abdul, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Hi there. I'm Abdul Kazi. I'm based out of Toronto. So this is a really interesting combination because Chris is in Buffalo, New York. So across the pond, if you will.
Yep. I love it, man. I love it. And of course, I already tripped up this morning, but that's totally fine. So, yeah, this has been a great opportunity. I'm really super excited to kind of talk about this. I think both of us bring a lot of perspective to what zero trust means to us, to our customers, to folks in general. Um, so yeah, let's kind of start off. Gonna just kind of introduce myself. Again, my name is Chris Gill, cloud modern workplace advocate. Very deep into Azure, endpoint management, on premises, hybrid, in the cloud. Do a little bit of everything across the Microsoft platform. Been in the industry for 20 years, and just really enjoy talking about this stuff. So, Abdul.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, my name is Abdul Kazi. I've been in the IT industry for 18 plus years now. I've been focused on Azure since 2014, and I work with enterprise customers, SMB, mid market, mainly on the Azure side, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Follow me on there. Check out my blog. I've done a couple of series on identity and other topics as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Abdul.
Sure.
So with that, let's get started. So the things that we want to try and at least focus on, again, this is a big topic, but we're going to try and stay by this tighter agenda, just covering zero trust, current state, future state, what we're seeing in the community, in the industries, those zero trust guiding principles and pillars. Um, Deeper into some of the defense areas. We talk about defense areas, what to really protect, what kind of workloads, where those workloads are located. We'll talk about the visibility, logging, tight integration with analytics. And then we have what we call homework. So our, community zero trust call to action. Anything else you want to add there, Abdul?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to give you an idea, this is really a high level session today. What we're trying to give you a baseline or foundation, if you will, for zero trust. Each topic we can have a separate session because each topic is such much more detailed. So this is really 100 level, 30,000 feet overview, if you will.
Awesome. We're going to switch into a different layout here just to give everyone a better view of what we're talking about. Abdul, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. So, as you guys know, we live in a new world of reality. Um, and threats are coming from all over the place, right? So, and security is moving at a fast pace now. So there's so many bad actors um, at every level. Think about in the old age, right? Like we didn't even have our washing machines, dishwashers, fridges connected now. Like those are connected IoT devices. So think about that, right? So the vulnerability for the bad actors is humongous now. Like that's why ransomware is on the rampant. It's such a huge black market now. Um, so that's the reality. So you really have to think about the security landscape. What are the challenges? Um, yeah, so I think that's what we should be thinking about, Chris.
Awesome. Yeah, I was chuckling because when you say that, I'm thinking, I'm like, man, how long until we have a blender on the internet? But yeah, you're right. I mean, the biggest thing too is, let's be honest. I mean, I don't want to use the P word, but the past 2 years have been a change in, what, like, how do we really drive this security approach? Where do we, I don't want to say attack, but, grow our cybersecurity strengths, and really become a little more resilient in these areas. So yeah, good call out. All right. So continuing this, we look at this old world, right? So we talk about again that 2-3 years ago that whole slate, the basically the layout changed. We had folks on premises. We still have on premises apps. We still have what's considered a monolithic app. This hard candy shell that I call a corporate network and firewall, right? A lot of that is starting to change, and I'd say it's well on its change. We look at how are things being delivered to users. Are there bots, right? Any website you go out to now, help pops up, right? And it's usually a bot service. It's somebody, not necessarily a person or employee, but it starts out with some bot service. It's trained to kind of help you with some questions, and then maybe hand off to a real live human at some point. We talk about corporate managed devices, more of a now bring your own. We talk about application management, device management, two different approaches there. On premises apps, near and dear to my heart, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, but how to maybe integrate with on premises or kind of move those to the cloud, service them in the clouds, just keep them running in someone else's data center. So the piece of the monolithics app where we had I build this for one particular service, and now I'm scaling APIs that can be used in a multitude of ways. Just the defense, the perimeters are changing now. It's not just the old, hey, I walk into an office, I've got 4 walls. We've got to protect all the way out to the end user's computing device, whether it be work sponsored or personal device, you name it. It's all the way out to the end user's computing device, whether it be work sponsored or personal device, you name it. It's all the way out to the end user. And then we've got just explosions of all kind of tracking and details of audit logs and diagnostics and whatnot. Where is that sourced? Where is it located? What are our security teams asking us to do with that data? And where do we need to store? And how do we act on it? Abdul, other thoughts?
No, I think you pretty much covered this all. This is actually, yeah. The reality is we live in a ever-changing world now, and the old school of thought from a security aspect is not going to work anymore. So we have to come with creative ideas of securing our devices, because if we use the old approach, it's not going to work, because cloud did not exist like 10 years ago, right? IoT devices did not exist. Now, yeah, and this is going to get even more challenging, because I'm sure in a couple of years, our cars are going to be all connected and everything, right? So yeah, the more devices, the more challenging it is going to be to secure them.
Right. Good point. Great. All right. So, I don't know. Do you want to take this one, Abdul?
Sure, not a problem. So, every company is coming out with the zero trust, right? So zero trust is nothing new. What Microsoft Zero Trust actually enables you is, how does zero trust employ our new principles, right? So the thing about zero trust is every access really requires a strong authenticated authorization with a policy constraint, and then there has to be some kind of access restrictions, and you can see the anomalies. Okay, are there any anomalies or not? So from that aspect, you have to make sure everything is aligned. And I'll use an example, or I guess our previous approach, what we were doing on-prem, if you will, is start from ground zero, meaning start with no access. That's the best approach. And that
So
is,
like a least privilege access
yeah,
model.
exactly, right. Least
Yeah.
privilege access. So I think that's going to be the simple security model, if you will, to assume safety based on the network and other factors. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And the only thing I would add to that is, just really, I look at it, background and identity. So, for me, it's like identity is a big forefront of that, right? Whether you're strongly authenticated, and we're talking, that MFA approach, MFA everything, get some, maybe FIDO keys or some hardware token or whatever it may be in front of folks, whether it's administrator, end users, you name it. Be honest, I mean, most of us can't get into our bank accounts without having that set up. So, I would expect that at work as well, across the corporate coverage. Just something we need to do. It's something that we, kind of need to do to protect our workload. So, all right. So yeah, diving a little bit deeper into this. We talked pillars before, in different areas. Again, just to harp on identity a little bit. We say identity, and I touched on users, but really, identity meaning it could be a device, it could be service, it could be, some part of that control plane. So, again, just, hitting home on that least privilege identity is a really good call, or least privilege, excuse me, access. You really want to start out with what's right for that role, what's right for that, device, person, whatever it may be. Um, Abdul, could you hit a little bit on endpoints? And
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
definitely hit there too. That's near and dear to my heart. But
Yeah, so I'll hit a little bit more on the identity piece, right? Because identity, when people think, okay, and think from your personal aspect, right? Identity is becoming such a big deal because we live in a world of identity. So even from a personal aspect, you might have multiple identities now, your bank accounts. So each and every online presence requires an identity. So how do you manage that? Like every company has their own identity, and then you have other companies like Microsoft and Google, and you can use their identities for a single sign-on. So there are many options, which obviously increases the risk factor as well. So you have to kind of factor
right,
that piece as well. Microsoft also is pushing out for passwordless. So that's the way we're looking into now. If you buy a laptop or a computer or equipment now, um, you can even use your like biometrics for that. So yeah, identity. I see identity becoming just its own. It is already a own pillar, but it's going to basically go into different streams, if you will, with all the needs that we need. And then to Chris's point, identity to begin with least privilege access, because identity is not only a user object, it is a service object as well. So if that service is calling out to an API and stuff, you need to make sure that that identity object only has the access required to call out that API, not providing more access to it. On the endpoint side, once the identity has been granted access to the resources, or could be to data is gonna flow in different devices. So I'll come back to my IoT example. So IoT devices from smartphones, people are bringing their own devices, BYOD. Partners are going to be accessing it. So that's the other challenge, right? How do we monitor and enforce device health and compliancy from a security aspect as well? Endpoint, because people want to work from anywhere. So think about, especially with past 2 years, we've been working from home. We want to work from anywhere now. We're like, oh, I don't want to be in a physical location. As long as I have internet, I want to access all of my resources, right? Which kind of moves up to the next um, pillar, application. So the challenge a couple of years ago was IT became such a big thing that the IT departments, or I guess the security departments, would lock down everything. So And I'm sure you've kind of heard the term shadow IT. That was invented because people would be like, oh yeah, okay, I have to work on this document. What I'm going to do is, if I go home, I'll have to connect to VPN and this and that, and it's causing me too much security. I'll just email this to my personal email, and that's where shadow IT.
Yep.
Not understanding that if you email that, now that document is living somewhere else. That document might have proprietary information, compliance requirements, right? So
Right.
those are
Even
the
metadata too.
yeah, exactly.
Metadata about the business. Yeah.
Exactly. So now you have that application or that document that you want to access from outside, but that security is already breached. The IT department thought, "Oh my God, we're doing such a great job of tightening security," but no,
Yep.
it goes hand in hand. So you have to work closely with people and make sure that you don't tighten it up. Otherwise, people are going to always find loopholes. So shadow
Right.
ID is really a loophole, right? So yeah,
Right. And I know a bunch of my friends say this too, and I know even the security folks near and dear to my heart. It's like you want to make sure that it's something that's easy, right? It's like you want to come at it from from that app protection, from the identity protection piece. It's got to be easy, otherwise, you're right. People are going to circumvent it. So it's like make it seamless, make it invisible, passwordless. I love that call out too. It's like, but you want it to be not noticeable to the end user, just seamless, so they can get whatever they need to get done.
yeah, and then from a and I'll touch and then from an infrastructure standpoint, right? So think about infrastructure. Regardless of what you're doing, if it's infrastructure as a service, IaaS, if it's PaaS, platform as a service, you're going serverless, right? Kubernetes, Dockers, what have you. That has to be secure as well. Who's accessing it? Where is being accessed? What are that infrastructure being provisioned? Because in the old days, when I used to be system admin in my previous life, I used to take physical backup tapes to the bank, right?
Yeah.
And on a rotation or 2 weeks rotation, because if there was a fire or something, just have that data outside. So and then how are you protecting your infrastructure from physical attacks as well? So I think that's the other challenge now. Yeah, if you're in the cloud, then the public cloud, the hyperscalers responsibility to make sure that that is secure. But if
Right.
you have your own data center, you have to secure that as well, right? So yeah.
And if you don't mind, there's one other part that I really like in this infrastructure space too, is this whole idea of it's like, and I think a lot of us still deal with it to this day, that's standing access to things, standing access to resources, to servers, to services. And this approach where you have a just in time approach. You can kind of reach out and say, I need access to this. How long? Is it an approval process? Does it go away after you're done? That really helps kind of bring it home and secure that infrastructure piece of the puzzle too.
No, great point, Chris. Absolutely, I agree. Moving along on the networking side, right? Networking is really important because uh, you have to think, how is the network secure? So if you are for example, hybrid environment, meaning you have a presence in the cloud and you have presence on-prem and you're connecting, is your data being moved from on-prem to the cloud? Is it secure? Is it encrypted? Is it encrypted at rest? Is it encrypted at motion? If somebody gets access to your data, is that going to be a problem, right? So those are networking. It also has to be make sure that networks are segmented properly as well. Sometimes we talk about three-tier architecture. So that's another thing. How are you segregating your application layer from your database layer from your web application? So those are the things that have to be also factored when you're designing the network. Subnets
Right.
are going to be coming into play.
And
Chris?
it's a good call out because I always think too at times networking, and I think immediately I think firewalls, but you're right on. It's that micro segmentation really plays a huge part as well.
Yeah. And then lastly, let's talk about data. And then, the challenge with data is, if you think about it, in the past 5 years, we have created so much data that we haven't created in centuries or decades, or yeah. So data is exploding. How do you keep data safe? How do you keep data getting out of bad actors as well? Is data encrypted? Because before, the beauty was you were in your own data center, right? Now your data is everywhere, and then you're accessing that data from everywhere as well. You don't have fat clients or applications, right, which are installed. Now let's say you're using a SaaS application, software as a service application. So your email could be, like, for example, Gmail or Outlook, what have you, and it has data. How's that data being backed up? How's that data being accessed? Who is accessing it? So that also becomes a challenge as well.
Right. And I'd also just add to it, there's a component of where, right? Where that data is being accessed to, which may be subject at times, right? So, I think of I could hop on a plane, and the state of the world right now. As much as I don't want to talk about Ukraine, maybe there's something that I do or don't want that type of data to be opened in a certain part of the world or a certain part of the globe. Just applying different protections. So I know we'll dive into that a little bit later, but that comes into mind too, is the where aspect, which I don't think we had to think about as much in the past. We do now.
No, actually, that's a very great point, Chris, because that actually really comes into mind about data classifications as well. Because a lot of companies, depending on if you a highly regulated industry like banks or military or whatnot, you have to classify your data. Is the data confidential? Some companies have highly confidential data, right? So those data classifications are absolutely important, because based on the classification, you're going to start putting security measures on that.
And legal. I'll throw out legal. Take it from someone who knows.
Yeah, exactly. So I think these are the 6 main foundation elements as a source of the signal, right? So think about all of these elements which make up zero trust. And as I've mentioned early in the beginning, we can probably talk about each of these as individual sessions, and actually for days, because we can talk about that, but today is just a high level.
Right. So I know we kind of hit pretty deep in some of these, but I know from these slides we'll walk a little bit closer into again how each one of these really breaks out and what it means to each one of these individual pillars. So we talked a little bit about multi-factor and that users and session risk. When we at the end of the day, it's like you really are kind of reaching out to really just truly verify. Are you who you say you are? Are you on the device that we think you're on? Kind of verifying that device, verifying the identity, making sure that I want to use that word explicitly, because there's an explicit validation that's really happening. You don't just want to trust, like, from, I'd say even a few years ago, this looks like it's a domain account, or it's a, on-premises or cloud account or whatever. I need to verify it. I can't just trust that it, it's a at yourcompany.com email address, that it's good, that we're good to go. I don't necessarily can trust that this device that might have been, joined to your domain or joined to your cloud or whatever else is legit. There could have been a bad actor at play. So, I need to identify that and explicitly validate the device, the identity, whether it's really in our inventory, whether it's, risky or not. I say risk. I know we'll talk about that a little bit deeper later, but, just think of it as more of a, again, is this in the location that I expect? Has the device been updated? Is it running a compliant version of an operating system? Things like that. Abdul, additional thoughts on those two?
Yeah. So, one of the things we've seen is the CEO is emailing somebody and say, hey, I'm in a meeting, I cannot come out. Can you get me some Apple cards or uh, some vendor cards and use your credit card and yeah, those are
Yeah, because we always do that at our businesses, right? We buy everybody in the organization like $1,000 gift cards just on the house, right?
exactly right. So yeah, uh, yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things we've seen. So and there are other examples as well. So network, infrastructure, and but yeah, I think we have to start thinking from that aspect that every time you meet somebody or every time you do something, it has to be the least privilege, and we always don't let your guard down. I'll put it this way. Every time you're doing anything, ask, okay, does this make sense? And yeah, we can go from there.
Awesome. Man, I'm trying not to talk a ton about endpoints because I could go deep, but on the data side of it, we did step a little bit into, the how do we really protect that? How do we really, identify? It's like, well, how to identify the data? How to put some kind of wrapper around it, or some metadata, or classification, labeling, depending on the sensitivity of the file. Man, I feel like I've probably spent my entire last year talking about just those few topics. How do you really get your handle on those things? So yeah, from a little bit of on the app side again, I think we hit that pretty well on this past the infrastructure as well. I guess I'd poke in a little bit on the network piece. Again, it's just we're in this world where you mentioned before, it's like these things are moving so fast, so rapid. One of the biggest things here is to really make sure that auditing of any of this stuff is going on, that it's rigorous, that it's quick, that it's repeatable, that it's automated, and that it's actionable. So, a lot of this stuff, you want to be able to see very quickly what's happening and get somebody or some automation approach to address it as quickly as possible. Additional thoughts?
No, I think I'm good.
Awesome.
Like as you said, we can talk about a lot on this, but I think we should, yeah, move to the next slide because there's so much other things we can talk about as well. Or I guess
Right.
it's going to start narrowing it down. So yeah.
Right. So, and from this perspective, let's just touch on at least the services that Microsoft brings to this table, right? So, when we talk about identity, obviously we're talking about Azure Active Directory. Then there's many different components that we can use inside of that environment. Some of the rebranding stuff. It's now Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. We have Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So I'm sorry, Defender on the side of what can I do to protect those workloads, whether it's the device firewall, malware, antivirus, EDR protection, or XDR, that extended detection of response. Super powerful in a lot of organizations. Now that's kind of been changing. It's been like built into somewhat into E3 and E5 from a licensing perspective. So that's again feature rich for a lot of organizations. Endpoint Manager, near and dear to my heart. Both on premises and the cloud. Just kind of helps you manage those devices, helps you manage configuration, patching, whatever else. Then we can talk about the data again. Information protection still near and dear to all of our hearts. Pretty rich feature set there. From an application side, we talked a lot about SaaS apps, and it really comes down to this approach of a what's called a CASB. So we have that cloud and access security broker that kind of watches any of the stuff being shared from the user device out into SaaS apps. Azure Security, of course, another umbrella feature that I call overarching any of the infrastructure that you build in your Azure environment, whether it's virtual machines and network, any of those types of workloads. And then again, at the bottom, we talked a little bit about the intelligence and the automation that comes into play with Microsoft Sentinel. Used to be Azure Sentinel, it's now Microsoft Sentinel. But again, you build workspaces, you send the diagnostic logs, build the rigid playbooks and whatnot into that environment, and it just allows you to kind of prevent against threats, detect and respond to things coming through. And Abdul, any additional thoughts here?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. And then on the Sentinel piece, that's becoming such a big influencer on the Azure side because it's truly becoming a SIEM,
Yeah,
security information and event management tool. And then based on that, Microsoft is doing XDR, extended detection and response as well. So these two pieces hand in hand really becomes great from a security aspect because security is paramount for everything, right? So once you have these two pieces, you can do a lot of things, um, from logging, monitoring, um, and all that. So yeah, because to Chris's point earlier, a couple of slides ago, like when we thought about security, firewall is something that came to our minds, right? Oh yeah, firewall, we are secure. That's all. But even today's firewall, which are intelligent firewalls, are not enough because things change.
right,
The way we do things are not even the the way we used to do things before.
right. Well, right. I mean, even to the extent of just take one example of, stand up a server, apply install an application on it. That really isn't the case anymore for a lot of these things. You're building it's a application as a service, and you're deploying it to maybe Azure Kubernetes service, or as a container approach to things. So, stand it up, tear it down. If you need to patch it, you basically just it's like you patch on the side, or you rebuild that image, you redeploy it, and move on. So, yeah, the different pace, different world that we're in right now.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, so we're going to try and pick up the pace a little bit. We'll hit home on identities again, just a little bit more into these individual pillars, talking about again, full end-to-end approach with this identity, making sure that reiterating that we have HR systems, we have external users, we've got all kind of different SaaS apps in the cloud, different cloud-hosted applications that we want to make sure that we have full security around these. Might be custom-built apps as well, but we want to kind of bridge that gap and say, here is a secure identity management plane that not only addresses the future needs, but also addresses some of the current or even some of the on-premises needs. As we talk about maybe legacy-based auth, for applications on premises. One of the things I've been working with lately, again, is just that the Azure AD App Proxy. Really, really easy to set up. There's some nuances with really getting all the applications configured, but it's a really quick and almost a reverse proxy approach to getting access to things that are traditionally have been on premises. So it's not really a lift and shift. It's I can still host it here, but I can use the rigid security and identity plane from Azure and Azure AD to get to those resources. Anything else you'd like to add there, Abdul?
Yeah, just from an overview standpoint, right? So think about Microsoft identity is the largest identity in the world. So everybody pretty much is running Active Directory or some sort of Active Directory. If you are on-prem, a lot of people, when they move to the cloud as a greenfield environment, they do prefer Microsoft because it touches so many different aspects. And then from an identity, you want to go single sign-on because it's one kind of throw through choke, right? Because when the user leaves, you disable that account, and boom, all the other identities that is linked to that main identity gets disconnected. It's not like our individual lives. We have 10,000 identities because different identity for banks and emails and other accounts. So that's why Microsoft wants to make it a single sign-on, make it easier, and then you can have policies. So the other thing is, from a least aspect is, if you're signing in from a different location, even it's going to ask you for multi-factor authentication, saying, okay, you haven't been to this location, you're going to do this. And
And
that's, yeah.
I figured you're starting to talk on multi-factor, so let's just dive right into it from that perspective. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I'd say if you want to continue on your thought, I figured I'd just move the slide ahead for you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Actually, yeah. So, because if you think, and that's where Microsoft is also using the intelligence as well. So if you are if you signed in from one location and then after 5 minutes, so let's say if you're signing in from North America, as we would be, and then suddenly we're signing in from Europe or other location, and they're like, whoa, what just
Or even Toronto. I mean, it still takes me about 3 hours to get there. So
that's why the MFA should kick in. And then there are other things now that Microsoft is also trying to do. They're trying to move away from the passwordless technologies, and then to add more security. In the old age, we used to have those RCA tokens, so those physical devices you would carry along. Now, you can have those FIDO keys. They work amazing. The other thing could be Windows Hello, which is biometrics, and then actually it takes I think it's Retina as well. So, and then you have biometrics as well, right? So, and we're pretty much used to it now. Like, people don't even think about that we want to use this. Before, yeah, like, oh my God, I don't want to use it, but we're so used to it from our even personal devices on your cell phones that you can do it. Chris, anything to add there?
yeah, I'm just thinking that it's like, I know you and I are talking at it from from a business perspective, but I look at I got 2 kids in my house, and they're both I've introduced them to LastPass and utilization of FIDO keys and all this stuff, and it's become second nature for for someone who's 12 and 14. It's like they get it, they understand, they kind of hated it sometimes too, but it's the nature of the beast. It's like, yeah, I know there's some cars out there that you can just get in and go. You don't need the key or whatever else, but it's like we still, for most of us, we still need some kind of key to, start the car, kind of get in and go somewhere. So it's same deal here, right? I know you started touching on policies, and let's go back to that just a little bit with how we kind of, I guess, make sure that we're really crafting those policies, smartly for our end users, for our devices, for the workloads. Any thoughts on like what you've been seeing in the industry, Abdul?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, because we want to work from any device anywhere, it really becomes a challenge from a security aspect to control that. Because how do you make sure that if you are sitting working in Starbucks, for example, their Wi-Fi is going to be secure and the data that is being accessed is all encrypted, right? For example, the other factor is if you are outside somewhere, out of your on-prem environment, you would need a another factor of authentication to make sure that you are the person you are. So there might be things. So let's say if you're in the office, access will be open because the physical office is secure environment, meaning they know that you're the right person to access this information. So yeah, it depends. That's another challenge, and that's how the enforcement is done on different levels.
Awesome.
Chris, anything you add?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit on the conditional access piece of it, because I know, again, something near and dear to most of our hearts. But from a perspective of I can now see in I would say we can now see clearly where somebody, one of our users, could be on a device. They've done something, or their account's been used in some inappropriate way somewhere, some location, whatever else. We can see that some of these smart policies reach back and say, from a conditional access perspective, I've seen this happen once, maybe twice. I'm going to try and block it. I'm going to ask the user the next time they sign in to provide 1, maybe 2 factors for multi-factor authentication, and or request a password reset based on what's going on. So it's like, I know, Abdul, that you're in Toronto or whatever, but I saw somebody else sign in from, I don't know, Brazil today, and I saw it happen twice. I want to do something smart about that. I want to make sure that I prevent that from happening again, and just protect the identity. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting environment, and a good time to be in this environment for sure.
I know, and that's actually gets right into our next slide, right into the segue is identity lifecycle, least privilege access, and audit reports. So it all boils down to governance. Regardless if you're in the cloud or on-prem, you definitely need to have a strong governance. So what I mean by that is, have a strong IT policy. Um, Obviously, in the old age, we used to do password resets or password changes every 90 days, which might work, might not work, depending on today, based on if you have MFA or how you're doing things. But the whole idea again is, have an identity lifecycle, make sure that, and the identity lifecycle also depends on the user as well, right? So if you are a regular user, your identity lifecycle is going to be very different if, other than if you are like a domain admin, or you're a privileged user, if you will. Technically, nobody should actually be using a domain admin account. You should be using a second account, but
Right.
the life cycle is going to be very different, because let's say if there's a root like global admin. Okay, so let's use the global admin account on the Office 365 side of things. The
Do
life
we have to? But yes.
options there, Chris. But yeah, from a life cycle, you really need to figure out, okay, what is the life cycle? Because the password reset of that account is going to be much quicker. Who has access to it? Because it has
Right.
high privileges, right? So those are things. And then for that, because it's tough to do least privilege for that account. Like obviously you can on a global account level, but that's why the policies and audits come in, because every time something happens, you should be getting audit reports and whatnot. So yeah.
The only thing I would add here is this, and I kind of like this slide because they show like a holistic. It's like a little bit of a life cycle approach here, and I think that the key thing that I just want to hit home on is, when I think about this, you want to make sure that you have a rock solid process for this identity. As people come to your organization, maybe they move to a different location, or whatever else, they leave. You want to make sure that's rock solid, that you don't have any, just accounts laying out there unused. Because, again, it's like, it's bad enough that we got to manage the people that are actually, working, whatever else. We don't want one of these accounts to get in the hands of bad actors. So, just keeping the pulse of that is super important to a lot of businesses. All right. Endpoint management, near and dear to my heart. We'll pick up some pace here. I know this is going to be exciting, but really when I talk about how Microsoft Defender really plays in this arena. Again, we're looking at all different locations, all different pieces of the puzzle, whether it's email or the operating system, how your device is functioning, what networks it's on, privacy information, whether there's a malicious app that's installed or attempted to install. We want to make sure that devices are secure, that they're compliant, that they really, are monitored, that they're protected, that we're kind of granting access when appropriate, when needed. Again, this full ecosystem, it works with Azure Active Directory, Defenders, kind of, reporting back to that environment in Azure as well. We could send that back to Microsoft Sentinel again. It's got its own dashboard as well, but just a huge piece to this zero trust approach. Kind of managing endpoints, managing the devices. I know there's a lot of partners in play here too, but again, it just makes comes down to making sure that our data, our devices aren't exposed to any kind of risk, right?
No, makes sense, Chris. Okay. Fair point.
Awesome. So again, just harping on that same, restriction. It's like we want to make sure that, wherever that device goes, the policy follows, right? So whether you go to Aruba for the weekend or something, take some time off. Maybe you want to check a few emails, whatever else. We just want to make sure that device is still allowed, it's still enrolled, it's hardened with security policies with MFA. If we see any bad activity, we want to make sure that we can block it. But we also want to send signals back to folks to say, well, maybe from a security perspective, we don't really like what happened. We want to wipe the device, or we want to selective wipe the data off of the device. So, a lot of opportunity in this space, a lot of features available to us. Abdul, any additional thoughts there?
No, I think you covered it well, Chris.
Excellent. And then, again, back to just consistency and compliance. You want to make sure that policy just follows, whether it's, configuration manager, Intune, starting to see some of these lines blur, to be honest. I think just move back one moment. Sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure that, again, we're starting to see some of these lines blur with what's on premises versus what's in Intune. Those possibilities are, starting to growing more every day. So yeah, it's been kind of a pleasure to watch what's going on there. Any other thoughts, Abdul, from that perspective?
No, I think you covered it well, Chris, because I know that's your forte. So
I know, and I know there's a lot that we need to cover here, so I'm gonna skip on. There's a lot of great resources online, especially with Intune. There's a lot of great training through MS Learn, whatever else. But yeah, let's move into applications a little bit. So again, just kind of walking through, making sure that that rich policy is kind of following the device, is following the file, it's enforced at every step of the way. So conditional access, big play here. It's making that what we call like an adaptive access approach to things, right? Just limiting read only or blocking sensitive types of data depending on where you're at. If it's an unmanaged device, again, we just don't want that type of stuff being opened. Do you have additional thoughts there?
not on this one, Chris.
All right. And again, just from a sensitive data approach, we want to make sure that we have rich policy base, rich DLP, data loss prevention, to make sure that things are classified properly, that we can automatically apply some of this. Let's be honest, we don't. We'd like to touch these technologies, but where appropriate, if we can use AI, if we can use some built-in templates, systems that other folks are building, take that opportunity. Make sure that we're properly monitoring, investigating things as well. Whether it be something that may have triggered based on some governance policy or some potentially risky behavior. We just want to make sure that those things are investigated and that they're handled appropriately.
Yeah, and just to add really quick is you should classify highly confidential files as well, right? So let's say if there are files that have PII, meaning personal identified information, like your social security number, name, address, what have you, that it's is assigned a label, right? Confidential label, because then you have to abide by some compliancy policies as well. So make sure that is labeled properly, and then based on the labeling, you'll have to make that data secure accordingly as well. Because once you get audited, the auditor is going to ask, "Hey, guys, this is not properly labeled. This is not. This is very sensitive data," and then you're going to run into issues as well.
Awesome, good call out. All right, so into infrastructure, and I feel like we talked a lot about this, Abdul. we can just briefly kind of touch on this, but
Yeah.
again, the importance here, I would say, on at least for for our viewers, for ourselves, uh, a lot of Microsoft's approach now includes cross cloud coverage. So whether it's workloads in AWS, Google Cloud, you name it, there's all kind of integrations where we can actually get that information back. We could integrate identity. We could pull back rigid auditing and information from other cloud providers as well. We can also extend a lot of the from a Microsoft Defender for Cloud perspective. We can extend that type of security and policy out to these other cloud providers as well. So, any thoughts there, Abdul?
Yeah, so as you said, the cloud footprint is much bigger now. So use those tools to leverage other clouds. What I'm seeing in the enterprise space and even in the mid market, people are going multi-cloud now. Nobody wants to stay single cloud. So the challenge is people are looking for one pane of glass, and Microsoft is providing one pane of glass for not only monitoring from a security aspect, but like for example, I'll talk about touch on cost management. So you can even manage your AWS cost in the Azure portal as well, right? So we've seen that transition happen because it's, as I said before, one pane of glass, so it's going to be much easier. Uh,
Right. Right. And I'll just call out too one thing it actually is central on the slide, but Azure Arc, what a great set of features
oh
where that those workloads, those servers, they can be located anywhere on premises, another cloud, someone else's data center, but you can you can reach out and apply policy, apply that rigid patching, security policies, whatever else, to disparate devices. Wherever they may be. So really, really cool area. I just, give a nod to folks. If anyone who isn't, experienced with it, hasn't looked at that, please go take a look. Do some research around Azure Arc. It's a really great, set of tools for the industry. All right. I think we talked about this already. This multi-cloud security posture. We got ahead of ourselves, but that's fine. Again, just calling out here that the continuous monitoring, those best practices, like Abdul had mentioned, the Azure Arc, Azure Security, all those pieces and components will kind of keep you on that a baseline based on what you want to set for your organization. It will tell you when you start to skew from it, and keep you kind of at on a North Star approach for following those best practices in your environments. Any additional thoughts there?
no, I think we covered this well, Chris.
Beautiful. All right, network. I always say I'm not a network guy, but it's like just when I thought it was out, they pull us back in, right? Abdul, do you want to hit on this one just a little bit?
Absolutely. So what I'll say about network is such a beast, if you will, right? So when I've done my Azure landing zone sessions with partners, or even I've done a couple of them for the community, networking always comes up because networking, sometimes it is an afterthought. And the example I'll use is your CIDR blocks, your IP addresses, the private IP addresses. The challenge is if you don't plan properly, you're going to run into issues. So if you already have a CIDR on-prem, you cannot bring that into Azure or other public clouds, right? It's not recommended. So the thing with networking is how are you going to be segregating your environment from that aspect? So what I've also seen is some people don't even use Azure Firewall. They're like, oh yeah, we'll just use VNets and NSGs. Sure, if a small environment, that's fine. But for larger environments, it's not going to work. And it can get complicated very quickly because if you are bringing your own firewalls, right, like your own NVA firewalls, like a Palo Alto or whatnot, so that's going to become very complicated. But from an infrastructure standpoint, what you should be really doing is, when you have the management groups, you would be segregating them out on a subscription level. Make sure your VNets are properly configured. So
Mhm.
you have the properly NSG set up. If you're not using a firewall, I will highly recommend use the Azure firewall. With Azure firewall now, Microsoft actually has two flavors: standard and premium. Premium does a great job. Obviously, keep in mind, Microsoft is not competing with the or it's not going to be up to par to those NVA firewalls. Azure firewall is not going to be a Palo Alto, uh, and that should not be the expectation. Um,
Right.
but it does a great job on that side of things. And then on the application side, make sure you have Azure Front Door and Web Application Firewall. So one of the enterprise customers that I was working with and doing their Azure landings and review, and they're like, we have web applications, but we do not need web application firewall because all the traffic is going to be coming through our on-prem and going out. And I'm like, no, that's not a
Yeah.
good idea. Because you're adding complexity, you're adding latency, there's going to be a lot of issues. You should take the data, the traffic should be going out directly to the internet. And then for that, you definitely need web
Yeah.
application firewall. So design those things properly, right? Because you need to design them. And then, Chris, if you want to move on to the next slide, basically, then from that aspect, also have to start figuring out about, okay, what are the attacks going to look like on the application level, on the data level, on the VM level, right? Like even on the on-prem level, and you have to start figuring that out because by like DDoS attacks are very common on the application or web application side, so you have to kind of figure that piece out. On the VMs, how secure is your VM? Can anybody get to it? And I kind of alluded to the three-tier architecture, right? So you have to segregate your applications on that front because nobody should be able to get to the database from the internet or even from the higher level, right? That should always go through your application. So those are the things you kind of really have to start thinking and planning it out. And then on a next front, Chris, if you want to move up, um, these are the things that should be outright, like Azure VPN. VPN is a no-brainer,
Right.
because you know that data is going to be secure, and then so VPN should always be there. Azure Bastion is a perfect option. I still see a lot of people opening up RDP ports 3389, which is a big no-no, especially for a production environment. Why would you want to do that?
It's a
I
very warmable, port too. So yeah.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
the other
that's
thing,
the beauty with Azure Bastion too. I don't. Hopefully, I'm not stealing your thunder, but it's HTML based, right? It's like HTML5 based. So from that perspective, we all know what ports that's coming from, right? So it's a pretty
exactly.
protected workload. We're 443 getting into some type of management experience for SSH for whatever. So yeah, but
No,
yeah,
exactly.
please pick the.
Exactly.
Excuse
The
me.
other thing I want to also say is, and Chris kind of alluded to this, is we should be doing just in time for the access. So if you want to access your environment, there should be just in time. Okay, half an hour, whatnot, and then boom, the access is done. And then Azure Virtual Desktop. The beauty I like about this, it does reverse proxying, meaning the connection is initiated from Azure to outside, or if you have the RDP actually initiates the connection from your computer to out, right? So that's much more secure. So, and then Azure AD proxy, that's another amazing thing that you should be using for the zero trust. So yeah, these are the best things. And then Chris, if you want to move forward, I think we yeah, and I already kind of alluded to this, data at rest, data in transit, and data in use. So this has to be accounted for. Um, some of the things that people don't think about because right off the bat, your VM is not going to be encrypted. And people are, oh, really? It's not encrypted? Okay, so yeah, you have to start using encryption, BitLocker or whatnot. So yeah, those
Yeah,
things have to be accounted for.
and we hear a lot about like the confidential computing environments. And this is exactly what we mean here, where it's like or trusted execution environments. But it's like you want, depending on the type of workload too, you don't want to go crazy. But if it's financial, PII data, whatever else, it's like that needs to be done on a very secure, trusted, confidential computing environment. The bottom, and I play on word here, but the key on this slide, wink wink, is management of keys, secrets, certificates. You want to make sure that that stuff is handled inside of Azure Key Vault. So that's backed by hardware security model, or HSM. It's a really slick approach. I really love what Key Vault and AKV kind of bring to the environments, to customers. Whether it's certificates, secrets, you name it. For storage, for just encryption of the services, data. It's really, really rich feature. So
No, absolutely. And actually, that brings us to the community call to action, right? Because we're almost out of time here.
yeah. So let me skip ahead a little bit. I'm going to flip past. Can I jump to? We're just going to move quickly through here to our community call. Sorry, folks. Of course, my mouse is being a little wacky right now. It's playing games with me. There we go.
Go ahead, Chris. You can cover this.
Awesome. Yeah, so we're going to bring ourselves back into the mix here. So yeah, from this perspective, again, we hope you enjoyed what we brought. I know we tried to stay on topic. We got a lot to say in these areas. As you can tell, each one of these pillars is pretty large. It's pretty big. But the important parts, at least from us to you, is to make sure that we truly adopt some type of zero trust architecture, starting by really identifying the most critical and the most sensitive workloads for you, for your organizations, for your business. It's a lot of conversation, it's a lot of planning, a lot of nooks and crannies there. But the sooner you have those discussions, the better off you are. That'll help you design a full end-to-end approach. Again, you don't want to rush into this. We've all been there. Really, truly, just want to make sure that we, based on those conversations, based on that initial detail and planning, that we gradually go through and find, areas of improvement. And we start maybe with some of the small ones and, kind of move forward, but we want to make sure that we just don't really, run into causing any kind of business continuity issues. So, but cover all the gaps. And then again, anybody who knows me, I swear up and down that not swearing, but just talking about MFA, that is, passwordless is the way to go. Strong authentication. Everyone, please turn on MFA. We are seeing, some kind of staggering numbers still in the communities and tenants that, folks, just turn it on. Please do what you can, especially for your cloud accounts. If you're using global admin, please make sure MFA is turned on. Try to get away from some of the other legacy stuff. If you're still using the per user MFA, there's good rich documentation out there to kind of slide away from that, get away from the no SMS or text. Those things are easily phishable. So we kind of want to get folks moving in the right direction. Get better every day, every minute that goes by with our zero trust approaches. And again, we threw 2 resources out here, aka ms.zerotrust. That's a good starting place. The assessment, the aka ms./zero trust assessment, kind of walks you through, even for yourself, if you have a personal tenant or business tenant, kind of walks you through some of the questions. Are you doing the right things? What can you do better? How can you improve on your current footprint? So all good resources. I just say thanks everybody for tuning in and joining us. Abdul, fantastic job.
No, thank you for your opportunity, Chris. So yeah, definitely enjoyed the conversation. I know at some point we kind of rushed into it because of time, but yeah, definitely we can have some sessions on this as well in the future.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Anything else you want to add at this point?
No, I think you covered it well, Chris. But
Excellent. All right. Thank you all for joining, and happy Global Azure 2022. We hope to see you again next year.
thanks, everybody.
Have a great day, everybody.